G'day folks, it's Will here and welcome to this video review of the all-new Pivot Mach 4 SL. Now the Mach 4 SL is Pivot's full suspension XC race bike. It's designed to be lightweight and efficient, but also highly capable on technical XC terrain. Although it looks similar to the old Mach 4 SL, the frame on this bike is all new for 2023. It draws heavy inspiration from the development of the latest Les SL. The tube profiles are slimmer, the linkage has been pared right back, and the carbon layout has also been updated. The result of all those changes is a claimed 300 to 400 gram weight reduction over the old frame, which is significant. The frame now dips below the 2 kilo barrier, which is impressive given it's using a proper DW Link suspension design rather than a simpler flex stay platform. As with the previous version, the new Mach 4 SL is designed to accommodate a 100 to 120mm travel fork. There are specific World Cup builds that feature a 100mm travel Fox 32 step cast fork, while the standard builds come with a 120mm travel Fox 34 step cast fork. The rear travel is also different between the two builds. The World Cup models employ a 40mm stroke shock, which delivers either 95 or 103mm of rear travel, depending on the flip chip location. The regular builds then use a 45mm stroke shock, which delivers either 106 or 115mm of rear travel. According to Pivot, the geometry isn't affected by the flip chip. However, the suspension feel is quite different between the two settings, and I'll get onto that in more detail in just a bit. Geometry on the new Mach 4 SL has also been updated, though it's obviously different depending on the fork travel. With a 100mm travel fork, you've got a 68-degree head angle, a 76-degree seat tube angle, and a 450mm reach on the size medium. With a 120mm travel fork, the head angle kicks back to 66.7 degrees, the seat tube angle to 74.7 degrees, and the reach shrinks to 437mm. The rear center length is 432mm on all 5 frame sizes from extra small through to extra large. It's worth noting that all frame sizes will accommodate a large size water bottle inside the front triangle. From the medium sizes and above, you can actually fit 2 bottles inside the front triangle, and there's also another mount underneath the down tube, which allows you to fit a 3rd bottle or a tool or accessory. Now there'll be a huge range of build kits available in the Pivot Mach 4 SL. The price is going to kick off at around 10,500 Australian dollars for the base model. Regardless of price point, all models feature exactly the same full carbon fibre frame. You might notice that none of the build kits feature live valve suspension, which is unusual given how big of a story live valve was with the previous version. In fact, the new frame doesn't have any provisions to fit live valve at all, which does make it lighter and easier to manufacture. Instead of live valve, the new Mach 4 SL relies on the RockShox twist lock remote. On the World Cup models, the remote activates both the fork and the shock. On the regular models, it only activates the rear shock. Now, the bike that I've been riding is the Pivot Mach 4 SL Team XTR. Now, this bike features Fox factory suspension and a transfer dropper post. It's got a Shimano XTR drivetrain with Raceface Next SL carbon cranks. There are Shimano XTR 2-piston brakes with 160mm rotors front and rear. There's a Reynolds Black Label XC wheelset with Industry 9 Hydra hubs. And while our test bikes are fitted with a Maxxis Recon on the front, the stock builds will come with 2.4-inch Maxxis Recon race tyres front and rear. Confirmed weight for this bike right here is 10.91 kilos, and that's weighed without pedals and with the tyres set up tubeless. That's a pretty impressive weight figure given this bike has a 150mm travel dropper and proper 2.4-inch wide rubber. As for the frame on its own, Pivot claims a Mach 4 SL weighs just 1,975 grams for a medium frame including the shock but without hardware. Now it's not the lightest cross-country bike on the market, though that frame weight isn't too far off the Trek Super Caliber despite the Mach 4 SL having a lot more travel and a proper dual-link suspension design. Now I've been invited out to Cortez in Colorado to test out the new Pivot Mach 4 SL. While I am eager to ride it on home trails to compare it to bikes like the Giant Anthem and the Canyon Lux World Cup, I've managed to put in over 100 kilometers of riding this week to give me a solid first impression of what this bike is all about. Firstly, I'll touch on some of the things that I haven't loved about the Mach 4 SL. Obviously, the price of this bike is high, but then Pivot isn't trying to compete at the low end of the market. Much like Santa Cruz, Ibis and Transition, this isn't meant to be a budget bike. This is a seriously premium product, and Pivot would point towards the frame construction, the materials and the manufacturing tolerances to justify the price tag. Moving on to the new twist lock remote, and while I do like the ergonomics and it's nice and easy to use, the main assembly is quite wide, and that means that the brake levers do run a little further inboard than I'd like. Also, the left brake lever can contact the twist lock remote if you run the lever reach all the way in, though I do think this is less of an issue on the level brakes that come on the SRAM builds. If this were my bike, I'd remove the lock-on grips and replace them with cut-down silicone grips in order to move the controls a little bit further outboard. While I'm on the cockpit, it is pretty busy on the Team XTR model due to the cable-activated derailleur, dropper post and shock lockout. It isn't a huge deal, but it is pretty noticeable when you compare it to the super clean cockpit of the Specialized Epic World Cup that we recently tested. As for what I dig about the new Mach 4 SL, well, the incredible pedaling performance is a real standout on this bike. The DW Link design is very efficient and it offers great stability and support. I did initially think the seat tube angle looked a little slack on paper, especially with the 120mm travel fork, but that wasn't the case on the trail since the rear shock rides so high in its travel. Despite the efficient pedaling performance, the rear end generates excellent grip on both the climbs and on the descents. The rear end is smoother and more controlled than most XC bikes on the market. And while it isn't as plush as the Scott Spark, the flip side is that the Mach 4 SL isn't reliant on its remote lockout. In fact, during the first couple of rides, I kind of forgot that the twist lock remote was even there. I reckon Pivot has got the geometry dialed on this bike, and the chassis is nice and stiff laterally, so it responds really well to handling inputs. It is a really fun and capable XC bike, and it kind of just feels like a lightweight version of the Trail 429. I also love the versatility that's been built into this frame design. The fact that you can modify both the fork and shock travel gives you options down the line for adapting the setup. Speaking of, I did try both flip chip positions and was surprised to notice a big difference between the two settings. Because the leverage rate is lower in that short travel position, the suspension feels firmer and even more responsive under power. It also made the steering feel a little sharper and more direct due to the firmer shock putting more weight onto the front wheel. While I personally preferred the ride quality of the long travel setting, if I was heading away for a weekend of XC racing, I'd definitely make use of that short travel position. Now, while I'm eager to get this bike onto home trails for a longer term test, as far as first impressions go, I've been really impressed by the new Pivot Mach 4 SL. If you're keen to know more about it, the full review is now live over at flowmountainbike.com. Just click the link in the video description below. If you've got any questions for us about this bike, drop those into the comments and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video and we'll see you guys next time. Tooroo!